This video tutorial is for the forward bouncing ball assignment. In this assignment, we're going to use the principles of animation to create a ball that is bouncing across the screen. So to start, I will choose ActionScript 3.0. That's the one that I always want to choose when I'm creating a new assignment. And I want to start by drawing a sketch layer, a template, something that I can delete later that'll help me to know where to draw the objects that I want to draw. So down here where it says Layer 1, I want to double click on that and change that to Template or something that I'll recognize. I will get out my brush tool, which is B, and change the fill color here to something like red so that I can just see this. And I'm going to start by drawing arcs. Arcs are a principle of animation. It means that most things, when they move, they tend to move in a circular motion, either because of gravity or because of the fact that they're an organic thing like an animal or a person. So if I was to draw a ball bouncing across this screen, it'd probably look something like this. And each arc, as it hits the ground, it loses some energy, and so the next time that it bounces up, it's a little lower than the previous time. And so I want to draw 3 or 4 different little bounces, and this is the line that my ball is going to follow. Now I'm going to be animating on ones today. That means I'm going to draw every single frame. That gives me a much smoother animation. It also helps when something is happening very quickly. So the next step is to figure out our timing. How long do we want it to take to get across? How long do we want it to take to bounce down each time? If we figure that out beforehand, then we can figure out our where to draw the ball each time much more easily. So remember that 24 frames equals 1 second, which means if I was dealing with half a second, that would be 12 frames. And if I wanted even less than that, a quarter of a second, would be 6 frames. So let's say that each bounce I only want to happen in a quarter of a second, which means from the top of each arc to the bottom, I want to do 6 frames. 6 frames from here to here, 6 frames from here to here. That would give me a half a second for each arc. And that's pretty quick, but I think it'll look good as I go around. And I can always change these numbers. Maybe I decide that each arc is going to be a full second. Then I'll have to figure out how many frames it would be in that case. But understanding how frames and seconds are connected is a very important aspect of animation. So let's say I'm just drawing lines along this arc for each point where I will create a new frame and draw a ball. So let's say that this one is frame 1, and I want this to take a quarter of a second, so this would be frame 6. That means I have 4 frames in between here and here that I have to fill in. Now if I just did 1, 2, 3, 4, that could work. Just each of them is equally spaced away from each other. The problem with this is that we know that when things drop, they pick up speed. This is called a slow out. This ball is going to start very slowly at frame 1 and then get very fast right before it hits the ground. The way that I have to do that is by changing the distance between each time I draw a frame. If they're all consistently spaced, that's going to look like a ball that is dropping at the same speed from the beginning all the way to the bottom, and it's going to look unnatural. So instead of that, I'm going to do a slow in. And the easiest, or a slow out, the easiest way to do that is this. I'm going to cut it in half. That gives me 3 frames. And then for the slower part, I'm going to cut it in half along the slower section. So this top half is going to be slower, so I'll cut it in half. That gives me 4 frames. I'm going to cut this half in half, and then I'll cut this half in half. So each time I just cut it in half again because it's easier to draw halfway and it's easier to figure out halfway. And with 3 frames right here only going this far, and these 3 frames going much, much farther, that's going to be a slow beginning and a speed up. Now on the way back up, I want it to start quickly and slow down again. So once again, I'm going to cut it in half. And then for the slower section, I just cut it in half, and I need 6 more frames in between. So that means I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 more frames between here. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this is just an easier way of figuring out how to make something speed up or slow down. That's by cutting it in half. Once you've done that all the way around, and I'll do one more of them. So I got 2, 3, And I'm doing 6 in between because that's 1/4 of a second. 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that should give me the timing that I'm looking for. Now I've got this all figured out. I want to lock this layer. And we're considering this to be a tennis ball, by the way, some kind of bouncy ball, maybe a basketball. So we'll draw it accordingly. But I always want to, I'm going to throw this layer away eventually, so I want to lock it so I can't accidentally draw on it. And I'm going to click on this and hold down F5 a bit. F5 makes any frame last longer. So now this frame lasts for over a second instead of just being a single frame. And then I'll create a new layer by clicking down here in the bottom left-hand corner. And this new layer, this is where I'm going to draw all of the ball layers. So I'm just going to type in ball, and now I can begin. So on frame 1, my frame 1 is there. I'm going to change this to bright green so it's a little easier to see. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger also. I'm going to draw, well, that was a pretty good circle with the smoothing right there on frame 1. Now I'm just going to follow all of these little lines that I drew. So frame 2 should be right here. I'm going to click on frame 2, and I can either just click on it with the mouse or my pen, or I can even use the less than and greater than symbols. That allows me to move backward and forward through the timeline. And each time I want to draw again, this is the most important thing, and it's the thing people tend to forget. If I want to draw something new, every time I do, I have to press F7. F7, if you look down here, creates a new empty keyframe, which is designated by that little circle that has, it's hollow on the inside, so we haven't drawn in here yet. But I can only draw something new where there's a circle, and I create those by hitting F7. So now I'll also turn on my onion skin right here. Turning that on allows me to see a ghost of my previous frame so that I don't make the ball too big or too small as I go around. And this time I'm going to draw the second one. And they're really close together because that is slow in animation. Frame 3. Hit F7 and draw them again. Those ones are really close together. Frame 4, F7. Now, as it starts to go faster, I'm going to do a little bit of another principle of animation called squash and stretch. If I stretch this ball as it drops in the direction that it's falling, it's going to create the illusion of it moving very quickly. And I might want to even do that more here on frame 7 or 5. And then, lastly, when it hits the ground on frame 6, I want to squash it. And that's going to, I'm going to overdo it, I'm going to over-exaggerate it, because that's going to make it look like, in animation terms, you're only seeing it for a 24th of a second. So it may seem like a lot now, but when you play it through very quickly, it's going to be hardly recognizable. And we have to over-exaggerate things in animation, or they become unnoticeable. So now I'll turn off my onion skin, and I'll just play through it, and I've got the ball bouncing down. And it might be a little hard to see because it all happens in 5/24ths of a second, but it is picking up speed as it drops. I'll turn the eyeball back on the template and start drawing up on the other side. Frame 7 is here. I'm going to stretch it. Frame 8, I'm going to start to put the ball back in its normal location here because this is where it really slows down. And each time I go forward a frame, hit F7, and then draw it at the next place where I put a line on my template. So by frame 12 here, I should be at the very top of my arc. And each time, click on the next frame, hit F7, draw it again. And at this point, I should just be able to trust that my hashtags were right because I cut each of them in half. And this is another principle of animation that we're following here. This is a straight ahead animation. We're not doing what we did last time where we draw the first frame and then the 7th frame and then we draw all in between. Sometimes you can just go straight ahead and draw frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4. That's what I'm doing right here. So it's just a different way of doing animation. And you can use both of them to good effect. All right, so I've just gone about halfway here. I'm going to turn off my template again. Maybe turn on loops. When I hit this little loop symbol, I get these brackets, and wherever these brackets drag, when I play, it'll just keep repeating that section over and over again. Turn off my ball template. And you can see that those squashes and stretches happen so quickly, it's not really even noticeable that the ball is changing. And so what you're going to do is you're going to go through and animate this ball bouncing 3 or 4 different bounces. So move forward to the next one, F7, each time. Move forward a frame, F7. And even these ones that seem like they're going really close together, because I figured out my timings beforehand, F7, I'm going to trust that they work. And I'm not too concerned if the ball you're drawing gets a little wobbly as you draw it. I think that's actually part of the appeal of hand-drawn animation, and sometimes it's not absolutely perfect, so don't worry too much about it. And now I've got my loop all the way around. I'm not going to do that 4th one. So now I can watch it. And part of the reason why it looks as good as it does is because we did the timing. It slows down just slightly as it reaches the top of each of these arcs and repeats again. And that's something that's very hard to just eyeball. It's much easier to do that half and half thing. So as the last part of this assignment, what I want you to do is, let me stop this, I want you to create another new layer. We're going to call this one bowling ball, or bowling, or whatever. There's not a lot of space. And back on frame 1, I want you to do the same process again, but this time I want you to do it for a ball that would be a bowling ball. So I might create it. I'm going to throw away my old ball template. I just click on whatever layer I want to throw away and click on this garbage can, and I'm going to do another layer that's like a template for the bowling ball. So if I was to draw a bowling ball, how is that going to be different than the ball that I just drew, this tennis ball? Well, for one, it's not going to bounce as high when it hits the ground, so it's probably going to be something more like this, and then maybe, if anything, 2 bounces, and then it'll probably just roll a little bit before it comes to a stop. So now I can figure out my timing of this one as well. Another thing I can do to make it look more like a bowling ball is not squash and stretch it as much or at all. That's going to make it look a lot more rigid, like it's a really solid object. So we can use those principles of animation to make things have different properties as well. So if I want this to drop the same speed, this is frame 1, frame 6. Once again, I want it to speed up, so I'm going to go halfway again. 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe I want it to start to really slow down. So this time, maybe this one is, instead of 6 frames, it's 8 frames or something. Whatever you want to do with it, you're going to end up with something and then this last part, I really want it to slow down to a stop. So I'm going to have it be much slower at the end by cutting those ones in half too. This will be going very quickly, and then it'll start to slow down. Maybe I'll do a couple of them right there until it stops. So now, with that template, I'd lock that and the ball layer so I don't draw. I always just lock all the layers I'm not currently drawing on. And in this one now, we get out, and it's going to be going at the same time as the tennis ball as well. Make a new, bigger. So this time, what's the bowling ball going to look like? I'm just going to go forward a frame, F7. It should fall at the same speed because of gravity and science, right? I'm not going to squash or stretch it, except for maybe just slightly when it hits the ground here. And when I go through the same process, let me turn on what my loop is on. As I go through there, the 2 balls are going to do 2 different things, and you've done that entirely just by changing timing in squash and stretch and arcs using those principles of animation. So go ahead and get both balls doing 3 or 4 bounces, and when you're done, we're going to save this. Probably should have saved it beforehand, but I didn't. We're going to save this using the correct naming, in this case, whatever class period you're in, your last name, your first initial, and we'll call this one ball 2. Save that flash file. That's what the save as does. This is your working file that you can get back to whenever you want. And then press Control and Enter to create the Swift file. Make sure you've deleted all the templates and stuff too, because even if you've un-eyeballed things, the Swift file will do that. So you'll have to delete the template. But that creates another file called a Swift file in that same folder. And if I go to my H drive, I've got a bunch of these, but I think this one was the one I just did. Maybe not. But this Swift file Make sure you're putting things in folders. I'm not doing very good at that. This is the file that you created when you press Control and Enter. And if I just double click on this, you can see that you can actually just run your animations in that. Anybody who has Flash Player can see these. And that's the one that I would have you submit to me. All right, so that's the assignment. If you have any questions, let me know.